Islam and Caribbean American Muslims. This is the subject of our discussion. Islam is one of the fastest growing religions in the world. Over 1 billion people on the planet are Muslims. In the Western world, it is a source of controversy. Some Muslims believe that Islam has been erroneously portrayed and stereotyped. Carib Nation will discuss the teachings and practice of this religion. Last week, we looked at the basic beliefs, history, and development of the religion. Today, the second part of this series will deal with issues surrounding Islam and human rights. We have two guests knowledgeable in the teachings and practice of Islam. Mohammed Qasim Yusuf is the editor of Islamic newsletter, Voice of Islam. Noel Singh is affiliated to various Washington, D.C. Islamic organizations. Welcome to Carib Nation. I am Paul Niru, Tennessee. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Qasim and Noel, I'm very happy to have you for the second part of this series on Islam and Caribbean American Muslims. Now, on the last occasion when we met and we had this discussion, we dealt a bit with the beliefs and so forth. Now, I want to touch on some very, very controversial issues here, and I hope you gentlemen will be very straightforward in some of your views so that we could understand better the subject of Islam and human rights. Now, one of the subjects that is really creating a lot of concern for people is the way the Islamic religion or Islamic countries are treating women, the issue of women. In Afghanistan, women have to cover themselves up and they're not allowed to go to the hospitals and so forth. In Pakistan, there is also some other customs there that are repressing the human rights of women. Tell me something, Noel. Does Islam deny women their human rights?
Of course not. Islam granted women human rights 1400 years ago. Unfortunately, what's happening in some of the Muslim countries, you cannot blame that on Islam. These are their interpretations of Islam. Like in Afghanistan, a woman is required a certain dress code. Now, she does not have to cover her face, but the mullahs over there want her to cover her face. Secondly, they don't want her to come out of the house. Now, Islam permits her to come out of her house. How would she go to the market for food? How could she get a career to help with her family?
So Islam recognizes women as having equal rights like men?
Yes, to a point.
To what point?
The point of the family. In the family structure in Islam, it is required of the male to actually be the provider. Now, that does not say like here in the United States where if you have one working person in the family, you might find it difficult economically, so you have both working. But basically, you need the male to be the leader and the female to actually take care of the kids and to also work if necessary.
So Qasim, is that a correct application of the teachings of Islam, that the women are almost in a caste system where they have to just look after the family?
My interpretation of Islam relating to women is that women have equal rights with men in terms of spirituality, in terms of obligations. In other words, a woman is expected to do the same thing as men, to carry out the same rituals, same obligations, in terms of zakat, in terms of prayers, in terms of going to Hajj. A woman has equal rights with men, except they are different. They are equal in spirituality, equal in obligations, but they are different in terms of the family structure. In other words, a woman takes care of the family, but she is equal. Islam has granted her those rights. During the time of the Prophet, women were part and parcel of the Prophet's armies.
Why aren't we hearing from the Islamic communities in the United States people denouncing these things?
First of all, what is going on, Paul, in Afghanistan is a travesty of justice. It is something that is incomprehensible. This is something that even countries like Iran, that is generally conservative, and even the Saudis do not agree with many of the things that's going on over there. Afghanistan used to be a very robust country with the women working, they are doctors, they are teachers, they are lawyers and so forth. But the Taliban, we do not know where these folks came from. The Taliban are a bunch of Muslims who purport to present Islam on the Sharia, which we believe is a misrepresentation of the entire Islamic system.
But Noel, we have been informed that in Pakistan, women are being murdered out of some kind of ritual about honor. If they are caught committing adultery, they're being killed. If they break any law. In Christianity, the basis of it is forgiveness. If you commit a sin, you pray and you get forgiveness. And you could start life all over again. In Islam, what is it? Is it a final religion that if you commit a sin, you cannot have forgiveness? Somebody decides you die?
No, Islam, you have to take responsibility for your actions. That's the main point. God, of course, forgives whoever he wishes to forgive. Our duty here is to enforce the guidance he gave us for the benefit of the entire society. However, when you're speaking of Pakistan, where they have killed women just for saying this person is the boyfriend of this person without any proof. Now, Islam does not condone that. Islam, if you accuse somebody of, say, adultery, you have to produce 4 witnesses.
And if you prove it, does it mean that the sentence is death?
First of all, Paul, what is going on in India, in Pakistan, this thing about honor killing has nothing to do with Islam. Islam has granted women equal rights. In the case of adultery, if a woman is adult, males and females who are married, if they're caught with adultery, committing adultery, the Islamic law is 100 lashes. Someone who carries false message or false gossip that is false, they are inflicted with 80 lashes. The point is that there is no death penalty for this kind of crime, and we do not believe, based on what we have seen, we do not believe that these women have committed these crimes. These are tribal custom that came with these people, and Islam never immersed. They have never been immersed with these true Islamic values.
But the truth is they're doing it in the name of Islam.
They are doing it in the name of Islam, but they are totally ignorant. These people are not Muslim. They don't even understand the basic regulations of the Quran. The Quran does not mandate death for these people.
I also find it very interesting that in Pakistan, a woman, Bhutto, became the prime minister. And in Bangladesh, the prime minister is a woman and the leader of the opposition is a woman also.
Well, that is a big contradiction. Here it is that in 2 Islamic countries, you have women who are leaders of those countries or who used to be leaders at one time. And the leadership, the men and even the women, we believe, have, in a sense, perpetuated this kind of violence against women.
Now, is there a relationship between the human rights of women in Islamic countries with the rise of Muslim fundamentalism or Islamic fundamentalism? For example, I've observed around the world today that in America there's a rise of Christian fundamentalism, in India Hindu fundamentalism, in Israel Jewish fundamentalism, and in the Islamic world in countries like Algeria, in Turkey, in Iran, the fundamentalists are on the rise. Is there a link between Islamic fundamentalism and these kinds of violations of human rights?
First of all, there is no relationship between the rising fundamentalism and religious intolerance. Would you say that Christianity is intolerant because the Irish Republican Army or the Protestant Royalists commit violence against the Irish people? Would you say that the Jewish religion, Judaism, is intolerant because some West Bank settlers commit atrocities or violence against Palestinians? Would you say that Hinduism is intolerant because some Hindus burn Christian churches or kill Indian Christians?
So there's no relationship.
There's absolutely no. The religious law.
So you're saying it comes from the tribe more than the religion?
The religious law has remained unchanged for 1400 years. The law of Islam is clear. What is going on here?
Yeah, but why is it in Iran when the Ayatollah came to power and wherever the Muslim fundamentalists aspired to power, the very first act is that women have to cover themselves up and the rights of women are being proscribed.
Well, what you have done there, Paul, is try to define fundamentalism.
Okay.
What happens is, even here in America, you find that now with even some of the black Muslims. They join Islam and they've started to learn about Islam and how they're learning. There are two specific things in Islam. That's the Quran, the Quranic law, which MK had mentioned 100 lashes for someone who has committed adultery. Unfortunately, in Saudi Arabia, if somebody commits adultery who is married, they're stoned to death. Now that has come from a reported tradition of the Prophet, peace be upon him. So they follow that. Now what these people are doing, what you call fundamentalists, they are not actually taking all the gifts that God has given them, all the development that has gone on since the days of the Prophet, peace be upon him. They want to go back 1400 years and live under those circumstances and practice some of those customs.
But Caribbean American Muslims have never been engaged in those kind of activities.
Of course.
What explains that? Why is it that Caribbean Muslims and Caribbean American Muslims have not practiced that?
We in the Caribbean were brought up under a different tradition in terms of culture, in terms of social conditions, in terms of religious interpretation. We as Muslims, we don't have, we are not tied to religious past, our past. Like the honor killings. The honor killings is part and parcel of a tradition, not Islamic tradition, but part of a tribal tradition. And so we were brought up in a religion, in a country with religious freedom.
Would you say in a more westernized country?
Not necessarily, but we were able to think. We think, we question, and this is one.
That's the key difference, I think. Your ability to think.
But let me give you another example where increasingly people are viewing, whether rightly or wrongly, Islam in a very stereotyped way, if you would say that, and have concerns. Salman Rushdie, for example. Here is a case of a man who, because he wrote a book, expressed a view. The Ayatollah Khomeini virtually sentenced him to death and issued what you call a fatwa. Is that correct?
Paul,
how does one explain Islam, the Islamic teachings, with this kind of act?
First of all, Paul, to understand what Salman Rushdie did, I bought the book from London when it wasn't available in the United States. And under the guise of fiction, Salman Rushdie has denigrated, Salman Rushdie has libeled, slandered Islam. Salman Rushdie has attacked the sacred symbol, the personages, the wives of the Prophet Abraham, Bilal, the first black, in all of Islam. So unless someone knows the historic context within how Islam evolved.
But does that justify?
Let me finish.
Yeah.
Now, there are some who interpret that Salman Rushdie was a Muslim, and as a consequence, he was an apostate. Under some religious interpretation, an apostate is eligible for death. That is not my interpretation. I believe that Salman Rushdie wrote a nasty book, but I'm also a believer in freedom of expression. I believe that Salman Rushdie was a British citizen. He was outside the law of Islam, and as a consequence, the Imam should not have issued that verdict. I need to point out to you that the jurists of Sunni Islam did not join him in that verdict, but they are a large segment.
So you're saying that the Shiites, Ayatollahs, the leader of the Shiites, issued that,
Sunnis also,
but the Sunnis did not.
Sunnis also agreed with the ruling.
Some
there are many.
But if this goes on all over the world, if I write a book about Christianity and the Pope doesn't like it, then
Paul,
and he has the power, can he issue? Would you agree that he issue an order to have me?
I don't think MK has agreed.
Let me stop you right there, Paul.
With the fatwa.
We do not see much difference between the Ayatollah fatwa and $2 million on the head of Salman Rushdie vis-a-vis the American $5 million bounty on the head of Osama bin Laden. Here you have the world superpower putting a $5 million bounty on the head of someone who, under U.S. jurisprudence, is innocent until proven guilty.
So who are you referring to?
Osama bin Laden.
Bin Laden.
Right.
I'll get to him.
I'm just showing you the analogy here, where you're jumping on the Ayatollah. Whereas,
but it doesn't mean that because two wrongs don't make a right.
No, but
so if what the Ayatollah has issued is wrong, it doesn't become right because the Western world is doing something wrong. Do you agree with that?
I agree.
It's either we
100%.
believe in human rights or we don't believe in human rights. It's either the Islamic teaching is compatible with human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of movement.
Let me just quote you one verse from the Quran, a bulwark verse. Quran says, in paraphrase, "You who believe, be upholders of justice, even if it be against yourself, your parents, your kinsmen, even against the rich or poor." Now let's stop right there. In the U.S. Constitution, the Fifth Amendment has permitted someone not to incriminate oneself. This Quranic verse has effectively abrogated the U.S. Fifth Amendment. It is saying, you who believe, be upholders of justice even if it is against yourself. In other words, incriminate yourself in defense of freedom, in defense of justice.
Yeah. Another stereotype, or rather, or perception, is that Islam somehow over the years in the West has become more and more associated with terrorism. And you have mentioned bin Laden, for example. But each time you read about the Middle East or in the case of bin Laden, why is it in the West that this perception is increasing? Is it merely propaganda of the television, or there are some developments in the Islamic religion that has to do with terrorism?
First of all, let's make it quite clear. Terrorism and Islam, there is no relation whatsoever, because Islam does not condone terrorism in any type of fashion. Secondly, if you're saying bin Laden is a terrorist, okay, at one time bin Laden, when he was fighting in Afghanistan against the Russians, he was acceptable to the United States.
So in the Cold War, bin Laden was an ally of the West.
That's right. Today he's a terrorist. Now that does not say that the Muslims in general will condone if he actually committed these acts that the U.S. is accusing him of. If he did commit these acts, he should be brought to trial. He should not be proven guilty without even having a trial. He should be brought here, put to trial, and if he's proven guilty, then face the punishment.
As a general proposition.
So it's a distortion of Islam, those who are associating terrorism.
First of all,
and they're a minority, because there's, as you all said, there's 1 billion Muslims in the world, and only a few people do terrorist acts.
That's right.
Paul, you have to understand that where do we get our messages from? We get it from the media. And the media has stereotyped the Muslims. When you hear about a Muslim who commits violence, that person is known as an Islamic terrorist. When someone else commits violence, like in the Oklahoma bombing, the religion of the perpetrators are not mentioned.
Yeah, I remember when the Oklahoma bombing, the first reaction was that probably it's Arab terrorists or a nation of Islam.
So that it is that the media has helped greatly to perpetrate this myth and this stereotype.
Yeah, I'd like to move to another issue that is quite topical and controversial in the world. I have observed that in Eastern and Central Europe that we had the problem with Bosnia and Kosovo. And at the center of those problems are the fact that these people involved, significant numbers of them, are Muslims. I have not heard much from the Muslim world about these two causes. Have the Muslims been involved in the Bosnia and Kosovo struggles? What is the position of the Islamic world on
Well,
this?
here, first of all, Paul, let's make a distinction between what I call spiritual Islam and political Islam. When the sacred symbols of Islam is attacked, the entire 1 billion people will rise up, like in the case of Salman Rushdie. If there's an attack on Mecca or Jerusalem and so forth, you will see this reaction.
What do you mean in the case of Rushdie?
No, when he denigrated the sacred symbols of Islam.
Okay.
Now, in political Islam, what you have nation states, you have national boundaries, where each country judge what they will do in their own national interest. Take a look in the Gulf War.
Yeah, but was solidarity given to the people, the Muslims in Bosnia and Kosovo?
Well, yes, we believe so. We believe that to the extent possible, Iran was actually assisting them with weapons, and even the United States was aware of this. Even the United States, the largest country, I mean, the biggest world power today,
the superpower,
the single superpower cannot control events in Kosovo. The Americans themselves have seen. So what do you expect the Saudis to do or Syria or Egypt, when some of these governments themselves commit atrocities against their own people? How can they speak out against others when they can be accused of doing the same thing in their own lands? So we believe that Islam, the world of Islam, is not one unified force like in the old days, when in the old Islamic civilization, when the world of Islam can react and send an army against the offending party. In the situation in Bosnia, in Kosovo, in Chechnya, the Muslim masses bleed, but that's all they can do.
You know, during the Cold War, the Western world was pitted against the Soviet Union, and there was communism versus anti-communism. Since the end of the Cold War, they seem to be in the world, the Western world led by the United States, seem to be confronting the Islamic world and to some extent China. They're building relations, but they see China as a future world power. In times gone by, in old history, we knew that the Islamic world was successful in invading and occupying a significant part of Europe for many years. Now, do you see that in the future developments of world affairs, that there are going to be increasing conflicts between the Muslim world and the Western Christian-dominated world?
Based on my analysis, I don't think that is true. I don't believe that will happen, because as we become more educated, we Muslims become more educated, and we realize that the Westerners are way ahead of us in terms of knowledge, education, and technology, the Muslim governments will be forced to catch up. And so there would be, of course, isolated instances like in Palestine, in Bosnia, in Kosovo, in Chechnya, even in Kashmir. I believe there efforts are being made to resolve some of these issues.
But Noel, why is it in the Western world there is a fear that if Iran, Iraq, or some other Islamic country gets the nuclear power, that it would be a threat to the West? For example, when Pakistan exploded their nuclear bombs, India evidently felt menaced. But immediately the foreign minister of Iran went to Pakistan, and there was some talk that that bomb is an Islamic bomb. What is it, why is it that in the Western world people are afraid that if nuclear power and biological warfare, if Arab countries get access to biological elements that can be used in warfare, that it would be a threat to the West? Why?
Paul,
Why is it?
that is a bogus fear. For example, during the Gulf War, we have been told time and again that Iraq, Saddam Hussein has biological weapons, mustard gas, all of this stuff. And during the war itself, everyone was waiting, well, when Saddam will actually use this stuff.
Yeah,
and
when will the Scots be fired with
obviously,
chemical weapons?
it was never used. And then, so we believe that even if the Islamic world didn't exist, the Western military complex would create an enemy so that they can go test their bombs and weapons.
But actually, it's not a creation of an enemy. I think what happens is, you're finished with the Cold War. You have this big machinery, okay? Like they say, you have the oil and machinery. In the Gulf War, you got $6 billion from Kuwait. Where did that money go?
But did you
US
support
military.
the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq?
No, of course
You
not.
don't support it.
Absolutely not.
You all don't support that.
You cannot invade a sovereign nation under no pretext at all.
This stereotype, this perception in the West about Islam is a very, very serious matter. For example, there is a documentary done on Nostradamus. This was a great philosopher thinker centuries ago in the West who made a number of predictions. And in a documentary, he predicted that in these times, an Arab will emerge with a turban, which would be an Islamic person, that he will rally all the Muslim world. There would be an alliance with Russia, and that they will drop a bomb on New York, and there will be a war and destruction. Now, what is your view of this? Do you believe all this is part of growing undercurrents between the Western world and the Arab world?
Islam does not
and the
believe
Islamic world?
anyone can foresee the future. So therefore, by that statement alone, we have already dismissed Mr. Nostradamus.
No.
However, there is something there, because I've seen Christian programs where they have actually used that statement to say that someone in a blue turban will come up, arise, which of course they think it's Iraq right now, and with the help of Russia, cause war against the United States. Now, if they pursue that thought, they themselves may create the environment of where such a thing may happen. But we do not believe, of course not.
But you all are in agreement that in the West, the perception of Islam is not a healthy one for Muslims in the world, or for the relations between the Western world and the Islamic world.
We are not so sure that's the correct premise. For example, that the United States have gradually, you were right, that they lean towards Israel, but they have been trying to come in the center, more in the center, try to be an honest broker. In terms of Nostradamus, we are not sure that's what he meant, a man with a blue turban. In fact, that reminds me of this Antichrist, that Antichrist of the end of time.
Somebody like Hitler.
Somebody who will come at the end of time, who is a great Antichrist and so forth. But these are apocalyptic forecasting and prophecies that we do not subscribe to.
Gentlemen, evidently, you all are aware from some of the questions I've raised that the perception and the stereotypes of Islam in the West is very deep, it's very serious, and it could play an important role in world affairs. And therefore, as Caribbean American Muslims, I hope you all will be engaged in constant dialogue of explaining and building bridges with the various religious groups and undermining these perceptions. Have you all are engaged in that actively?
Of course, we have.
Oh, absolutely.
We work with the Christian churches. Sometimes we go and give lectures about Islam to the Christian churches.
You do?
Yeah.
That's very
so
good.
that we try to show them what we are. We truly are, not what the media portrays us to be. And again, you know, we'd like to thank you personally, you know, and
another thing is that
the program for
another thing is that Islam is being taught as you know, in the world literature. You know, studies in the Quran and Islam is more numerous now in many of the campuses in the universities.
Numerous. Well, thank you very, gentlemen. We'll stay close on that note, that in the universities of the United States, that Islam is being studied seriously and scientifically. I'd like to thank you all for being on this program, and thank you for watching Carib Nation. The subject of Islam is a very important subject in the world today. As we have seen from this discussion, over 1 billion people are members of this religion. In the Western world, there are many stereotypes, and it is very important that we deepen our knowledge. In this program, we have only been able to touch the surface of this subject. Until next time, I'm Paul Tennessee. Goodbye.